Hello and well met. This is Laven with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be going over some maps using the Fantasy Grounds map tools. I do want to touch on the product guidelines. I think I've done this almost every single time in the last couple of months, but I can't reiterate more of the importance of maintaining the sizes of your maps when you're creating them for Fantasy Grounds. So whether you're using a third-party tool or you're importing a given map or any sort of situation like that, you want to try to follow these guidelines as best as possible. So in this particular topic, the most important one here is this images for player maps. So this you want to try to convert these to WebP quality at 75% quality rating on it. So if you're going to do a conversion or convert a map from PNG or JPEG into WebP, that's the recommended quality. The maximum size is 4K by 4K. The static file size itself would be around 2, maybe 3 at the most. And then if it's an animated map, they recommend 10 megabytes or less. So I don't recommend animated maps so much anymore because I think it's kind of unnecessary. They do look really cool, don't get me wrong, but they are pretty big. And generally speaking, they usually include audio, which you have to scrub that out. And on top of that, it's a little bit harder to place the line of sight occluders on it, meaning it's the same process, but it doesn't always look right because of the potential perspective of the map. So what I'm going to go over today is just taking a static map and adding some 3D assets to it, some stuff to kind of embellish the maps, make them look a little nicer. The other thing to consider is that once you have more than a couple images, 2 megabytes does add up really quick, and that's not including tokens and everything, portraits and all that other stuff. So as your campaign builds, your footprint for sharing the data back and forth with your players gets a lot larger. So just kind of keep that in mind. So this is the developer guide. So if you were going to do a conversion or an official commercial product, this would be something that you might want to check out. But they're saying that they recommend WebP at 50% quality. That's the best trade-off between a visual file size and the quality and such. So that's for memory usage on your hard drive plus the network file transfer times. So if everything was in a super high quality, high def image, it'd take a long time to update Fantasy Grounds or download new content. And on top of that, if you're going to share it with your players, it's going to take a while to go from your computer to theirs. So that's why they do that. Also, the overall size would also include graphic assets, animated assets, and all those files together add up really quick. Both static PNG files and animated WebP, WebM files are much larger file formats for animation, so just keep that in mind. It can create slowdowns if individual files or overall product size is too big. So it can bring your computer or your friends that are connected to you, you can bring it to a halt. You also don't need to duplicate between GM and player modules. So if they're needed for both, you place the image in the player module and then you would link it in the GM module. So that's so you don't have redundancies for assets and such. That way you're not doubling up for no reason. But that's just a general guideline. I'm going to be using some content from the Fantasy Grounds store. You can also pick these up on a separate third-party website, but these are essentially the Game Tile Warehouse Meanders packs. I've shown these quite a bit on different streams that I've done because they're some of my favorites. I think I want to do kind of a more challenging map, perhaps a ship or something like that. That might be a little bit more useful since it can show more of the different approaches to putting line of sight on maps. But these are part of the Fantasy Grounds store. These do not have line of sight on them because they were made with Classic in mind, and they didn't. They were put out before Fantasy Grounds Unity, so that's why they don't have line of sight on them. Plus, the developer and SmiteWorks haven't gone back and updated it. So, but if you want more assets, there's a ton of really cool token assets that you can use to decorate your houses and stuff. So there's just quite a bit there. So I push this guy's work over a lot of them because I like the variety and I also like the style and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of good product on both the store and the Fantasy Grounds Forge. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, if you go to the Forge, this is the community content that's created for Fantasy Grounds, and there's map packs on here too. So if you like maps, I mean, there's not only can you get them there, but they're all over the place. You can get them all over the basically you can get them all over the Forge. You can find them third party, however you want. But the thing to keep in mind is paying attention to the file size, because that's generally problematic for most people. Some of you might subscribe to a Patreon where you get your assets from. Just look at the file sizes they're offering. If it's 4K and below, you're probably okay. Anything larger than that, though, would be for print or for a different rule set or something like that. So you want to make sure that those images are not too big. So this just kind of some tips before we get started. So anyways, I'm going to leave this and go back to Fantasy Grounds. So one of the things we want to go over is, like controlling the image, adding the, a grid onto it, using the occluders, and how to use it to enhance your gameplay. And then we'll add some animated assets and effects to kind of bring the static map to life. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to my modules area, and you can see I just have the bestiary, the SRD data, and magic items. I don't really have too many other things, but I am going to activate the Meanders map series. And the one I'm going to do today is the ship starter, which is a pretty large map pack that has a bunch of ships on it. And I think these are a little bit more difficult to do line of sight on, so that's why I'm going to do those. And then I'm going to take and grab this maps and image section up here. And then the way he puts these together, I like this selection panel. So this is like a thumbnail that has all the maps bunched together. So if I open this up, this gives you access to all the different maps, which is really cool because a lot of times you're digging through a list of things and it's hard to tell what you have. This way you kind of have a preview, overview, and then you have a direct link to each one of these sections. So there's a galleon picture here that has different sorts of levels. So for instance, there's a top, there's a low, there's a galleon top. These are all different levels of the same ship, and then there are some variations like underwater, sunken, that sort of thing. So this would be helpful. And there's a burning version of it. So you have so many different varieties. So if you're going to do a ship adventure, this would really help out a lot. There's even a skirmish edition. So if you wanted to show the same boat but a different map with a different thing going on, you have one where a kraken is attacking the ship. So there's all kinds of really cool options. So there's like the sunken, a sinking version of it. So that's why I like this particular one. But I'm going to go ahead and grab this top deck here, I believe. So I think that these are kind of more challenging, and they can present difficulties in your interpretation of how the line of sight should be applied to it. So I think I'm going to use that one first. So this has a combination of both indoor and outdoor features. That's another reason I'm going to use this one in particular. And then we're going to add the water on the outside, and then you have some lighting in here that we can fulfill. So it just kind of depends on the type of map you're going to be using, but I'm going to expand this out so you can see what I'm doing and kind of stretch this out. And that's an important aspect of Fantasy Grounds, is putting the image in a location that you can access it, but it's not going to be covering up other things. And that happens quite a bit in Fantasy Grounds, if you haven't noticed. So Windows management is a thing. So to give myself a little more room, I can actually collapse this menu on the right, so I don't really need access to too much more in this area. So I'll go ahead and collapse this down at least one. I can move this over. So that gives me room for like NPCs, characters, that sort of thing over here if I need to. Down below here is my show notes. So I have my links and stuff I wanted to cover here, but I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then once you have the frame sized, you can use this little toggle area up here. And there's an extents thing where you can zoom out, you can zoom to fit to recenter the map. So the first thing that you want to do with any map, whether it has a grid on it or not, is you have to put a Fantasy Grounds grid on it. So when you go to unlock the map, you'll get the map controls over here on the right. And we're going to go all the way to the far right where it says grid. This doesn't have a grid baked into it, which is something I recommend if you're going to be using maps in case, because sometimes the maps are not quite square. And when you go to line up the grid, it doesn't work. So the next thing I want to do is turn on the grid for visibility's sake. And as you can see, it's kind of off a little bit. And I'm not sure why that is, but it looks like it's probably off just a little in the grid size. So I might have to adjust that. I want to take a look at these though first. There's a door that goes into this area, and that's in here. I'm just kind of wondering if the original image was actually 50 or not. But this is the sort of thing you'll run into when you're using a virtual tabletop, especially if the grid is already baked in. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about it too much because I already have a part of this grid set. So let me try 32 and let's see if that fixes it. Yeah, it's okay. I don't think that's the problem though. But I think 32 is a lot closer to the scale that this should be in regards to the ship and whatnot. But it looks like you could take this on the layer level here and then select the layer, and you could stretch this out if you needed to see if that's going to help at all. But what I'm noticing is that the more you play with this, the more frustrating it's going to get for you. So you got to be careful with that. But I'm going to see if I can adjust the grid a little bit. So you have these arrow keys. All I'm going to do is just kind of shift the actual grid up. And that actually kind of fixed it. So if you look at this here, as opposed to down at the bottom, you have a kind of an equilibrium here. And that's what I was looking for. So I kind of wanted to be a little bit more even from top to bottom. I'm not too worried about left to right so much, but I'll look at that in a second. So maybe from there, I will change that to kind of line up here with this doorway. And then I can go add that in. So yeah, so this kind of balanced it out. But this is sort of stuff that you're going to be dealing with a lot of times when you're working with these maps. So you got to kind of watch that. But I'm not too worried about it, but it is something that you'll face. So when you get maps online especially, make sure they're quality maps. And what you can do if you really want to is you can take this layer and you can grab the layer itself, unlock it, and then you can move it where you need to get it to line up. See, it's not quite where I thought it would be as far as size goes, but now see it's at, yeah, this is really goofy. So it's still at 32, but it looks way off. So let me try 50 again and see if that's going to fix this, and then go back to this layer. Yeah, see, it's off in regards to the scale. So this is closer to what it would be in far as like squaring it up. And it doesn't have to be super like perfect in this case because it doesn't have a grid baked into it, but that could be problematic depending on what you're doing. So that's kind of the thing that you'll experience if you got a goofy map that isn't lined up with the grid, and then you'll have issues placing the grid later on. So you got to be careful with that. But it looks like that's kind of fixed it. So what I did is I re-stretched the image a little bit, and that kind of gave it some breathing room here. And you see it's kind of corner to corner, it's lined up, so it looks a little better there. And then let me take a look at this. So yeah, it's still at 50, but at least the image kind of fits with the, yeah, that's a little better, but the squares themselves look to be a little bit too big. So that's kind of what I was thinking, like 32 was probably a better number for that. It depends on the scale too, because the ship itself could be very large or very small. So see, that messed with it. Yeah. So you have to kind of, take it with a grain of salt, make sure that your image is good quality and that you're not having to play around with it like this, because this is where it gets frustrating and you're going to just throw your hands up in the air and call it a day. But in this case, I'm not too worried about it. It's not like I'm doing anything important right now. And it looks like the more you play with this, the more it's going to piss you off, let me tell you. So this is just something that I noticed straight away with images that you source from the internet. Quite often they're not lined up, or they have a grid baked onto it, but it doesn't line up with anything. And that's because quite often the image has been already resized. When people upload images to websites, it's usually shrunk, or the original size is changed and rescaled so that it fits on the web page, and also that it's a smaller file size, so the quality is down a little because they have to consider how much storage they have on their website. So there's little things that you have to think about when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, I think I'm close enough. And then I'll go ahead and redo this thing here where I was messing with it. All right, so just checking the dimensions here. So as you see, it's pretty close. It's off a little bit right here. So you can have it snap to grid, or you can turn off the snap to grid. That'll help you in some cases when you're trying to stretch an image. Because if you have snap to grid on, sometimes it won't let you place it where you want it. But it's pretty close now. But that's just a preliminary thing that you're going to notice. Especially these are maps that probably aren't included with the adventures. So when you're doing a map, make sure that you have the scale figured out, the resolution, those sort of things, because that'll help with this stuff. The other thing is I don't like this color, so it's kind of washed out. So I'm going to go to the tint and change it to some, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Control Z is your best friend in this case. That'll undo what you did. So I wanted to change the grid, not the actual tile. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back to grid and then change the tint here. I usually use like a yellow color so that I can see the grid, and it's going to be a lot brighter and a little easier to see, and then I'll turn it down so it's not too obnoxious. So that's a little bit more visibility, but it's not too crazy. So that's just a method that you can use to kind of help you with that. And then I'm actually going to move the grid over a little bit, kind of center it a little more. Okay, there we go. So I just shifted the grid down a little so that it's more even on either side of the ship. And then now the only thing is it makes this doorway area look kind of small, but it'll work. And now a chair size is makes more sense, because before it was like double the size almost. Okay, so the other thing is, yeah, see now this whole map shifted, which I didn't want to do that. So let me go back to here and move this down to here. There we go. Now it should be centered pretty well, and that totally messed with my centering of the image itself. So let me fix that. Okay. Yeah, it's really hard to be perfect, if you try to be too perfect, also like I'm doing right now, you're gonna drive yourself bananas. It's not. So most of the time, it's not worth it. All right, so now this is the play area. So when you're actually using the map or placing tokens and stuff, you want to be on this play layer. Now what I'm going to do is start thinking about how do I want to deal with the line of sight. So we have both indoor and outdoor features here. So I'm going to kind of go through and do the line of sight first. And there's some considerations because we have both indoor and outdoor, and then we have all this water. So what I normally do for a ship, in the earlier days, this was harder to do with Fantasy Grounds and the map tools, but it's fairly straightforward now, is for this railing, rather than putting a terrain or a wall there, I'm just going to use a window, essentially, or glass, because that will allow me to allow light through there, but players won't be able to pass through it very easily. So that's one reason I do that. And the other thing is, like, this railing here, I will put glass around that, but that'll just allow for that, players can still see through it, but they can't walk through it. And you could actually do that for these barrels and such too. So anything like this pile of rubble here, if they want to climb on top, they'll have to talk to you about it. But like this thing here is a mast, so that'll definitely have, a solid line of sight circle on there. But the rest of this stuff, like this debris and all this other stuff and these bars and these surfaces, you can put glass there instead of terrain. This terrain blocks light and vision. I don't necessarily want to block the light. I just want to block the ability just to walk right through it. That's all I'm trying to do. So glass is usually a lot better, like windows, instead of trying to use terrain. I think terrain works good on like cliffs and that sort of thing, but interiors and such, I don't think it's necessary. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use glass on a lot of this, except for the masts, and then these interior areas and these walls in here will have line of sight on it. So that's something you can do for yourself for your sanity. And then over here, I want to make sure that you have your map layer selected when you're getting ready to put line of sight on. Been many times where I've had it deselected, and then I go to start drawing my line of sight, and I get it all done, and then I realize it's on a completely separate layer. There's nothing wrong with that generally, but it can get confusing, especially if you have half of your line of sight on the main layer, and then you got the other half on another part. So make sure you select the item or the actual layer that you're working on. And that's very easy to unclick and accidentally stop writing to it. And the other thing is, if you lock this, you can't write to it, so you got to unlock the image if you can. And then we're going to start putting in the line of sight. So I think I'm going to do this in 2 sections, well actually 3, but for the actual occluders, I'm going to do the 3 masts, all the walls in here, and then I'm going to do the glass stuff after that. So that's how I'm going to attack it. So first things first is, since these are actually pretty much round, I'm going to take the ellipse tool. So I'm going to go into the line of sight tool for the actual brick wall, and then go into the ellipse, and just left click and drag until I get kind of a rough idea of a circle. So something like that. And I'm not worried about it being centered yet, so I'll worry about that later. The other thing is, this is kind of new, but if you want the navigation arrows to show back up, you can click on the navigation arrows and that'll bring these back up. So you can move over. And then when you don't want it anymore, you can actually turn it off. So I'm glad they added that option for us users. So then I'm going to do the same thing here. This is another mast, and then this one back here. So later on, I'll go back in there and I'll fix this to where you can actually go to the selection tool. You can double click on this line and then recenter it like that. So you can decide if you want to, if it's that important to have it centered. So double clicking will select all of the points. If you single click, it'll let you drag a point by itself. But in this case, I want to select the whole shape. left click in the center and drag, and then put this there. So this will block light and movement, but I don't have it right up to the edge, as you can see. I want to see a little bit of that contour in there. That's kind of a thing that you end up doing in the beginning, is get too close to the edge, and then there is a tool now where you can actually do a peek through value. But if you just go right up to this edge, I mean, you can use that if you have to, but just draw the line in the center as best you can. You know, get close. You don't have to be perfect. You can always go back and adjust it. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to start putting the deck lines in here. So I want to take and put in I'm going to go to the line tool in this case, and then I'm going to make sure I'm in the brick wall. And yes, I have the correct layer selected where I want the line of sight to go on. And I think what I'll do is I'll start here in the center part, and I'll just start clicking away until I get to closer to what I want. So this thing here is a starting point, and you can hit the shift key to make a straight line. So if you're worried about your lines being perfectly straight, you can hold down the shift key so you don't have to mess with this. So if I hold down shift, it's going to make that a straight line. And then here, I don't need it that straight because it's kind of got a curvature to it. So I'm just going to put a couple points so that it follows the contour more, and I'm not too worried about it being straight. So on these curved edges, you're probably going to have more points, but it's going to look kind of cool. But you want to try to limit the amount of points also. So you don't want too many points, because that also creates problems for calculating the splines. So when you have a bunch of data points like that, it will mess with Fantasy Grounds, especially like caverns. Like caverns are probably the worst because there's so many little dots and points. So now that I've got all the way over here and I want this to be a straight edge, I can just hold down the shift key and click there, click here. And then for this thing here, I'm going to just go through and double click. You notice I didn't try to land on it perfectly. And that's because quite often you'll miss it anyway, so you might as well just draw through. So that's all that. And I'll come back here when I'm done and make little fine-tuning adjustments. But for right now, I'm not worried about it. I want to get all the line work done first. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to start up in this corner, single click, hold down the shift key to have it make a straight line, and just do the same exact thing. And like I said, you can always go back and fix it, so it doesn't have to be perfect the first time around. So these are all straight lines. And now I'm going to just freehand it. I'm not holding down the control key at this point because I'm trying to get to this contour of this back part. And sometimes, since it's so blurry, it's hard to see the contour of what you're actually looking at here. But I think what I'll do in this case, since it's flat, is I'll go ahead and hit the shift key to keep it straight. And then I'll just let go here. Again, I'll just draw straight through that line. I'm not even going to try to worry about clicking on it, because you're just going to end up missing it half the time anyways. And I'm getting blind as a bat. So, all right, so this is just kind of like the preliminary line work. When you're done using a tool, then you can switch back to the selection tool and you can do your little edits. So like here, I can just single click on that little lip there. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. It's not If you go into here, it doesn't look like it actually crossed over. So I'll take this point and move it. See if that helps. And now single click. Nope, it didn't fix it. So what I will do is do that. That fixed it. So when you're done drawing your lines, you go back and make your adjustments. So if you don't like where the lines fell, or maybe you missed a spot or something, you can always go back and drag these, kind of change them up a little bit. You know, if you're a perfectionist and you want perfection here, you can always come back and do this. But when you're switching back and forth between drawing and moving lines and such and deleting, it takes more time. It's better to stick with one tool and then go on to the next tool and then on to the next tool and so on and so forth. Because it will take a lot longer than it absolutely needs to. So this is something that you'll learn as you're using the tool to stop. First of all, stop trying to be a perfectionist unless it's a commercial product or you're trying to sell it or something. And the other thing is, you know, is it worth your time? That's something you'll learn in Fantasy Grounds is, you know, with anything, you know, you're going to spend all like hours and hours on a map that you're going to use for like one campaign or one session. I don't think so. It's not worth it in a lot of cases. All right, so this is just kind of going through and fixing or adjusting. It's really not fixing anything. It's just kind of going through and going, oh, okay, I misinterpreted this area. So I'll just go back and kind of fix it. Maybe it needs to be up here. I don't know. But you'll see that you've missed a couple things, which isn't a big deal. It's not the end of the world. And there'll be parts that you won't like and parts you do like. And so you want to go through these and check them out and see if you need to make any adjustments. Like I said, it's not that big of a deal. As people get all stressed out and get all pissy about it, it's like, come on, man, it's just a fantasy map that you might use once. You know, if you're making a living on this, that might be a different story, but this just for, like, I'm just doing this for practice. I don't even care if it's perfect or not, unless I was going to do a full-on, you know, professional stream for somebody, like maybe a Kickstarter or something like that. I might put a little bit more effort into it, but, you know, generally speaking, you don't need to do that. So here's a point that I don't want. So if you want to get rid of a point like that, you can always single click on it. Don't double click or it gets rid of the whole line. And then you come up here where it says remove selected points and it'll take that point out. If you double click, it'll take the whole line. So you got to kind of get used to the behavior of Fantasy Grounds when it comes to working with the lines. So that's that side. Now I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. So again, here's a little point I didn't want. And see, that wasn't all the way connected. So I'll just come over here and connect it there. And then maybe I'll do some little fine adjustments on my wall here since it's kind of goofy. And that's all you got to do, really. It's not you know, it's not rocket science. You just got to get used to the behavior of the tool. I think that's where people get frustrated, is they don't know what it does. And when that happens, it can get a little frustrating. You got to get used to the behavior, but single clicking on these points allows you to manipulate them, move them, stretch them if you're in the selection view. If you're still in drawing mode, you're going to draw a line. So you got to kind of make sure you're in the correct tool for the job. So in this case, I'm in the drawing tool, but I'm in the actual selection tool. And that's important to make that distinguishment before you make any adjustments. When I first started doing this, I constantly was drawing when I was supposed to be moving points, and then I was also constantly, you know, trying to select a point here and it was drawing, or I was trying to draw and I was in selection mode. So that can be frustrating. You got to kind of get used to that, like switching back and forth between the different modes. Ideally, though, you don't want to switch back and forth if you can help it, because that's what ends up making this job a lot more annoying and lengthy. All right, so I got most of these lines in here. So let's do one more example of, so I'm not happy with how this came out, even though that's not a big deal. That's probably fine. But if you need to select, let's say you don't have any more points. So if you need to put a point in there, I'm going to actually draw a line and just left click and double click here to draw this line. And I'm going to go to the selection tool, double click and get rid of this whole segment. And now I have a point that I can use to stretch. So I'm in the selection mode, and now I can use this to kind of pull my point over. So that's how you insert a point, just in case you kind of, lock yourself out of a point. You just draw a line to make that vertex or that segment, and then you could get rid of the extraneous line and then use that point to do some more stretching or whatever you want to do. And if you wanted to, you can take these and stretch them out. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can do after the fact, but like I said, you don't want to get too wrapped up in that because you're going to spend all day on a map that you're probably going to use once. So just, keep that in mind. All right, so now that I have these walls in, what I want to do is talk about this glass. So I'm going to go to the window tool, and all I'm going to do is draw a long, skinny window for the railing. That's all I'm going to do. And all that does is block people from going off the edge. So I'm just going to go to the rectangle tool. I'm in the window tool. And in this case, I will use shift. So I'll single click and drag. And I'm just going to make a long, skinny window. It's right in here. And I don't care if I draw past the wall or not. So there's the skinny window. And I'll do the same thing up here. So long, skinny window, just like that. And like I was saying earlier, like you have this table here and this wall. So maybe instead of putting a line of sight wall through here, you can just put like it depends on how tall the wall is. I don't think this is going to block it might be a privacy wall, but I doubt it because this is like a workbench and then this is just a wall here. So I might just go something like this and just place this in here, or I might actually do something different, but this kind of gives you the control that you want without actually making walls. So these might be half walls. So that's where this would come into handy. If you're not really wanting to block the lighting or the actual shadows or have all that going on, you can do something like that. Like this table, like if you don't want them just walking right through it, but I'll leave that open. I'm not too worried about that part of it. Just mainly these bulkhead things. I don't want them walking through those. These are like railings stuff. What else? Oh, this thing here. Yeah, so this one, I'm actually going to go to the line tool and just kind of draw around it and make this like a window in itself. Something like that. So you don't have to be perfect, but at the same time, it's so they just can't walk through it. That's all I'm trying to do there. Maybe this boat, you might want to do something with that, but I'll leave it open in case they want to sit inside of it. And then back here, I'll do the same thing. I'll just go to the rectangle tool and make this bulkhead thing here. This is where the doorway is. There's probably like a railing that descends. So there you go. So that's going to help just block movement. That's all it does. And if they need to go through there, you can, hey Dan, if you need to go through there, you can pass through that by opening the window. So here's some unintended things here. Like I didn't want this to happen, but I knew it would happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make my adjustments. So I'm going to move these in, and I don't want this hole in the wall here. So I'll go back to the line of sight tool, and I'll come back and just overwrite that and just kind of connect the dots. So I'll do the same thing up here because by nature, the windows will cut out the wall. That's all right. So I was trying to purposely cut through there so that the lines would be a lot cleaner. And then I want to make sure that I reconnect these so that light doesn't pass through there. Same thing with this. I'm going to connect here and here. So that's just something that, I noticed. Yeah, like this thing here, this whole corner's out. So I'll just draw another corner here. So clicking on this point and here. And then what I'll do with this is I'll go back to the selection mode and put that there. And then this can actually go like that, so you don't have to worry about it. And in this point, I'll leave it. I'm not going to stress out on that little detail. But this is just, just stuff that you'll get used to, and that you'll consider, oh, maybe this isn't even worth it. So like maybe this thing, I'll put this here so it's harder for a player to pass through that area. And then I'll come back here and kind of straighten that out. So that way it's kind of blocked still, but they can't just easily pass through. Do something like that. And then I'll bring this up so where it intersects with the line, but I'm not worried about, what it's actually doing here. There we go. So these are just little adjustments that you're going to do after, all your line work is done. Then you can come back and make these kinds of, like maybe you want this to come out a little bit further, just stuff like that. This is when you start putting in your finer details of your line of sight occluder. So, and then here I might want to fix some of this stuff. So that one can be straightened out. This one straightened out. So you can kind of make it look a little nicer. But like I said, don't spend all day on it. It ain't worth it. Okay. So that's that. Now I got to fix these two. So again, just kind of put that there, going back to the wall tool, reconnecting it there because I don't want the light to bleed through that area. So I could have been a little bit more careful and redid that, but I'm not too worried about it. This is a quicker way to do it anyways. So this is just kind of like your fine tuning after you put all your main lines in. Then you go in and make all your little, see, this is all broken up here. So I'll fix that again. So again, I'm just going to come up here, put that corner back in there, and then put these lines back to rest in here. There we go. So that's just a way to kind of fix things if you need to. I mean, in most cases you don't, but sometimes you do. Just kind of just cleaning up things at this point. All right, so that's basically the majority of the line work. There's probably a few things I'm missing here, but for the most part, that's the majority of the work. So not too bad. All right, so there is a wall here that I'm missing. So whenever you're drawing a line like this, for instance, I'm going to draw this line through here because this separates the captain's bedroom from his study. So I'm just going to hold down the shift key, but I'm going to start a line here. So I'm in the line tool and the wall tool. So I want to left click, hold down shift, and then just double click and just draw through. And then when you're done with all your line work, you can single click on these points, clean those up for later. So you don't have to do it right away, but eventually you'll go back and clean that stuff up. So I did miss that wall, but other than that, we got everything there. So one of the misconceptions here on lighting is that ambient lighting is treated separately from a light source. So I'm going to make the outdoor lighting sunshine or sunlight or dusk or something like that. So I'm going to click on the lighting, and then I want to click on the drop down tool. And then, well, actually I need to go to ambient lighting first and then go to the drop down tool, and I'm going to go with dusk. So the outdoor lighting is going to be dusk. So if I go in here into the play mode and I start turning on this line of sight stuff, this is what it's going to look like, kind of like the sun's going down type thing. And what you'll notice is that dusk is inside the building. So that's something you don't want. So if you have a map that features both indoor and outdoor lighting, you want to exclude that from the ambient lighting. And the only way to do that is through a mask. So if I go back to the lighting tool Go back to the ambient lighting, click on the add mask function. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mask this area inside that's not supposed to be exposed to ambient lighting. So this is indoors inside the cabins. So this would be true if you had an indoor and an outdoor map and you wanted to exclude the lighting influence from outside. Now, if you're all indoor or all outdoor, you probably don't have to worry about this, but when you have a map that has both, then this is when this comes into play. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just kind of freehand this and just kind of trace around, and this is where the lighting should not go. So I'll just kind of, it doesn't have to be perfect, but this is just where I want shadow, indoor lighting. So this area should not be exposed to the sunlight. Not unless you have a door and you're opening it, that sort of thing. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm just holding the Alt key and kind of freehanding it since this is kind of irregular. It's not really a straight on map. And you don't have to do it all at once. See, as you can see, I accidentally let go, but you can do it in sections. You don't have to do it in one swoop. It's quicker if you can do it that way, but and then you can also do it in chunks like squares. So if you don't hold the Alt key and you want it to be a little bit more uniform, you can kind of come through here, kind of do it in squares. That way you can get your straight lines if you're worried about that. And then your irregular spots, you can use that tool you can use the Alt key to get those. No, because there is no tutorial on maps that have different floors, because generally speaking, you don't want to do that right off the get-go. You can do it, but it doesn't work. The line of sight and the way it is per layer, so you're better off just putting on a separate map, unfortunately. There isn't too many cases where you can pull that off very easily. Maybe on a map that has a cliff or something, but so in regards to line of sight and how the masks and such work, it won't work. A lot of people tried it. It just does not compute. So you're better off just making a separate map or having the different maps on in different sections on the same image, but not stacked together. But if you're going to do like a map that has 4 sections that are separate, then you're just going to do the line of sight on each one of those maps. You don't stack maps if you can help it. Yeah, different sections. Yeah, that's just the same thing. It's basically you're just going to do different areas. You just treat each one like a separate object. That's all. It's not any different than I'm doing now. So if I had another ship nearby, I'd just be doing that. The other thing is you might have big tiles, so you'd put all your tiles down first. And then if they were all going to be like, let's say you had 4 maps like this, and they're all going to be connected, you can put those in a subfolder and then your line of sight. And then that will keep it all together kind of. But in this case, you don't, it's doing all this on, separate buildings and separate maps and stuff. That's how you would treat it, as like a separate building. You wouldn't have to do anything special necessarily for that. So all I'm doing now is kind of cleaning up some of my mess here. Let's see. So the Alt key is what you use to access the freehand. I don't like it, but it's just how it is. So okay, so that's that. So there's your different sections. So the reason for that is you don't necessarily want to have the sunshine coming inside, and it's kind of like an overhead lighting. It doesn't change or do anything. When you're doing this. So the other thing is why am I not getting any occluders in there? Let me see what's going on here. So I have this. Oh, maybe because the light's getting blocked. I don't know. But that should be an occluder. Maybe it's because I don't have a token on the map. So that's the other thing, is when you're working on something like this, you want a token or an NPC. So I'm going to bring up the combat tracker, and then I'm going to put an NPC on here. So you want a couple types. So I'm going to have a acolyte, which is just like a human cleric. And then I'll put a dwarf on here because they have dark vision. So that gives you a kind of an idea of what the map is going to look like with different types of vision. Well, we'll call it something with dark vision. We'll do goblin. There we go. I know that has dark vision. Okay, so dark vision. Okay, so we want to do this because of line of sight and testing and such. So I'm going to drag these guys onto the map so that I have some reference as to what things are going to look like. And you want to test this as you go, so that way you don't get through the whole map and go, oh crap, I didn't. Yeah, see, here we go. Here's the occluder. So that's what I was looking for. So when you move this guy or girl or whatever around, yeah, I think yeah, it looks good. See, they can't move through the railing, so that's good. That's what you want. Okay, so now I got to put the doors in. I forgot about that. You might have doors and windows. So I'm going to go back to line of sight. And when you're working in Fantasy Grounds with this, you want to turn that stuff off temporarily while you're putting in your line of sight, your doors. So I'm going to put the door frame in here. So I'm going to go to doors, and I'm just going to use a rectangle tool. You can now use a line. There's a tool now where you can just use a line. I still prefer to use this door frame, but they did change the icon so it's a little bit bigger, so you don't have to worry about it as much. But I still like the door frame, the rectangular doors, so I can see them a little bit better when you're zoomed out. But what they've done is they've changed the icons now, so a doorway is more accessible when you can't see it normally. So right here, it used to just be a small little thing, but now it's easier to click on the token. But I still put in the big jalopy square doorway because I'm kind of old school, I guess. But anyway, so that's that. Now, if you wanted to put windows like portals in here, you could. So maybe I will put 1 or 2 windows. I think that's what these things are, or unless those are for ropes. Yeah, I don't know, but so glad for that change on. Yeah, no doubt. That was a pain in the ass to access a doorway. You can make it a thin line now, so you don't have to stress about it anymore. But I still like to have the rectangles so I can see it a lot easier, especially when you're zoomed out. When you're zoomed all the way out, it's harder to see the door frame. Now you can. It's so much easier because you can open it. Before you had to zoom in. So that, like, here's the window now, you can open that. So that's a lot better than it was, because that was a real pain in the ass on a big map. Okay, so now that we have that in there, let's take a look and see what we got. So I'm going to go ahead and turn all this stuff back on as if you were playing, and this is in the player preview mode. So here the goblin has dark vision, so there's no lighting in this inside of here right now. That's why it looks all grayed out like that. And for a human, obviously you can't see anything. I don't know how many times I've seen reports on the Fantasy Grounds forums that say, well, my guys can't see anything. Well, do they have a light source? Do they have lighting? I think that you're kind of new to this. You're not certain how that works. So if you want to test that out, you'll grab a light from either their inventory if they're a player, or you can come into the effects over here on the right, and you can drag a lantern, or I'll do a lantern in this case. So you can either drag it to the combat tracker or to the token. So I'll do it in the combat tracker, but you can grab a lantern, and I'm going to put it in the hands of the acolyte, and now they have a light source so they can see now. So that's kind of how you test that out too. So that's one of the things that that I see a lot where people's like, "Oh, I can't see anything." Well, yeah, because you're a human without dark vision. One of ours didn't have any sight on their sheet. Took us, yeah, it happens. I mean, if it was a snake, it would have bit you, but at the same time, when you're not used to it, I can't blame you. You don't want to sound like an elitist prick, like, "Oh, you should already know that." Well, you don't know that until you start using it. So it's a matter of getting used to the tools and getting used to the platform and the rule set. So some rule sets pay attention to lighting more than others. All right, so that's that. Now the last thing I'm going to do is put in some lighting, and then we'll do some some effects, and then I'll put in some animation to kind of bring this thing to life a little bit. So this is going to be turned off again. I know it's annoying to keep turning all that off, but I do practice that so I don't get confused and things get covered up and all that kind of stuff. So now what I want to do is go ahead and going to add any candles, lights. In this case, I'll do two sections. So I'll do one for the port and one for the stern. So I'm going to make sure I deselect the ship because I want the lighting on separate layers. So I want to go to the lighting tool and then go into add lights and then drop this down, and I'll probably end up doing a lot more candles and lanterns and such. So let's do some lanterns. So it looks like there's a couple on the table here. And there's one here, one there. Let's see, one in the corner. It's pretty lit up in here pretty well. And there's one up here up front. And do I see any others? No. But now there's maybe some candles. So I'm going to go back in here and select candle and kind of do the same thing. So there's a candle there. There's probably one there. Probably one there. Anywhere else? Is there a candle? Here a candle, there a candle, anywhere a candle. I think we're good. Oh, here's a lantern, I forgot. So go back to the lantern tool. Is that a lantern? Yeah. All right, so what we'll do there is do the same thing, but instead this is going to be the I'm going to rename this first. So this is going to be the port, or starboard, whatever you want to call it. Port, starboard, stern, mast. So we'll just say front, because some people don't know their ship directions like me. And let's see. I'm going to do this on a separate layer so I don't have this selected, because I want these lights to turn on and off independently. These got light bulbs or some kind of weird candles, so I'm going to use candles in this case. So I'm in the add light. I don't have anything selected yet as far as layers go, because I want it to be on a separate layer. And I'm going to select candle. So I'm going to put one here, and it looks like there's a candelabra right here, which is kind of hard to tell, but that's a candelabra. Is there anything else? I'll put one here even though I can't tell. And what's over here? This doesn't have a lot. This has a light here. Oh, here we go. This is a kind of bougie here, but he's got all these lights going all the way down here. The candle lights. Kind of bougie though. It looks like this might be a lamp, so I'll put one there, like a little candle light there. It's kind of a dim area for an office, because the bedroom's got more lighting than there, but oh well. He's got to see his ugly mug in the mirror. All right, so there we go. So that's that. So let's go back to line of sight, and let's turn that crap back on. And we're going to bring our human acolyte back into play here. So yeah, there's the lighting in there. And no door to get into the bedroom. How silly. So I want to go back to line of sight and door, rectangle, and put the door in. Now they can get in there. Gotta open it first. There we go. All right, so that's the bedroom. Yep. So get out of that captain's bedroom. What are you doing in there? This might be a wall right here, but I'm not going to sweat it. It could just be the end of the bed. I like it. So there we go. There's the interior with a little bit of lighting. Let's go over here and check this other one out. This one's lit up like a Christmas tree, so this one's don't have to sweat this too much. Yeah, it looks good. So that's that. Okay, so there's lighting. We got the railing. We got the indoor, outdoor stuff. Let's turn off this lighting crap again. And let's do the water and some animation. So the water out here is kind of up to you if you want to put an effect layer on it. I do in this case, but in some cases you may not want to because it impacts performance. I want to also rename the lighting or the lighting in case. So this will be the rear, the stern, and the one up here is the front. So you can turn off the lighting in one section at once. So rather than putting all the lighting on one layer, I got it in two separate spots. So if I want to turn off all the lights in this area or this area independently, you can do that. And that's the reason why I didn't have the main layer selected, because if you put all the lights on the same layer, you don't have as much flexibility to turn those on or off. So it's kind of up to you. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the effects, and down at the bottom you have this effects layer, and we're going to select that, and then I want to use a drop down for water. When you first put this on, you'll notice it's the whole map, so you don't want that. You only want the water parts. So I'm going to go ahead and enable a mask. And what you're going to do is unveil just the water area. So I'm just going to take big chunks of this at a time and kind of go like this. And I'm just going to unveil just the parts that I want where the water is going to be showing. And do the same thing over here and back here. And then what we'll do is we'll hand draw this stuff here. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, kind of come around in this area and unveil this part and do the same thing in here. So when you have these little nooks and crannies or uneven areas or circular areas, you need to use the freehand tool. You hold down the Alt key. So what you do is you block out most of it, and then you come back in here and kind of retrace around the spots that you missed. And that makes it so it's a little easier to kind of come through here and do this. So this is just, something you'll learn as you go. So that's kind of just gives that kind of oceanic look. And then what you can do is play with the amount. So maybe you turn up the intensity a little bit, turn the speed down a hair, turn the blur up just a touch. The blur, for some reason, that really messes with the performance. I don't know why exactly, but it blends the edges in with the occluders. If you just use a little bit, I don't know if that changes it or not, but it has been problematic. So you got to be careful with the effects and the blur tool. I like it because it kind of blends in the area. It's not such a big contrast. It kind of feathers it in, but in some cases it really messes with your performance. So you got to be careful with it. So I just kind of chilled out that water a little bit because I don't want it to be too crazy. But if you wanted to, you could turn the intensity up, like if you're in a storm or something like that. It kind of gives you the illusion that you got this moving water out here. So that's probably the only effect I'm going to use. I might use a cloud effect once in a while to go over the top of the ship, but generally speaking, one or two effects usually good enough. If you put more than 3 on there, you're kind of rolling the dice as far as impacting your table performance. It may look good on the map that you're on for your table, but it may not come across on your players very well. It might put their system into hurt. So you got to kind of mitigate how much of this stuff is really important to the game, because that's an important consideration when you're doing all this stuff. Because the more you add to it, the more data, the more performance demand on your system. So you got to be careful with that. All right, so now that I have that, if you want to lock some of your layers so that they don't get moved accidentally or deleted, that's a good thing. I'd leave the map layer unlocked in case you want to add more stuff to it, because we're going to. But you can, whatever you need to lock, you want to do that as you go in case you don't break your map accidentally. All right, so let's start thinking about some animated assets. So I don't know if we need a lot for this. I want to see what they have for water and maybe, some birds or something flying around. Maybe some fish on the side here. So let's take a look. So I want to go to, in this case, I'm going to go to the layers group. And then in the assets area over here on the right, Fantasy Grounds, the search engine, is not the best, but just know that you need to have 3 characters. So it could be FG space or FG underscore, whatever you need, but it has to be 3 characters. The other thing is make sure you're in the right section here. So I want to be in images, not all, because I don't want to look in tokens. I don't want to look in portraits. I only want to look in images. And this file's big enough as it is. So I'm going to go FG animated is the search term that I use. And that's, you can kind of pull up your animated assets that way. And it didn't find any because there's nothing like that. So what I might just do is do animated. See if that does it. There we go. So here's some air particles. Let's see what else we got here. Lightning. There's dust. Here's a bat swarm. Here's some birds. So I like the birds. So what I might do is take this birds decoration, left click and drag, and put it over here in the tile area so I can see how much. And this is going to be like a 31 by 31 tile. That's like wider than this. That's why I put it in here. So I'll go with a 20, maybe 20 by 20. That's 2 by 2. That's too small. Maybe I'll go 15. I just don't want it too hurricane. That's all I'm saying. And let's see what happens. So I'll stick that on here. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it shows the birds kind of circling around up here. And then when you want to move it, you go to the layer selection. Make sure you have this layer selected. And you can just kind of take the birds and recenter them where you want them to be. Kind of like it right over here over the deck. And then you can actually stretch this out if you want. If you hold the shift key or the alt key, it'll do it. Yeah, it's a shift key. It'll do it so that it doesn't get distorted. And then you can decide if you want to make it bigger. You can do all kinds of stuff. Also, recoloring might help because right now they're kind of a grayed out color. So if you have this selected and you're in the selection mode here, you can go to this thing here and recolor them if you need to. So maybe you want them to be more white. That way they might show up a little bit better on your map. But that's just kind of to put a little bit of movement on here so that it's not so static, like boring. And that's why you put this, these things on here to kind of bring the map to life, because that's a lot of times you don't need a full-on animated map usually. And when you have assets like this, you can just add little bits here and there without reinventing the wheel, so you're not creating problems, and that sort of thing. So you don't need a huge animated map. So here's some waves on a shore. So maybe if this was closer to like a dock or maybe the beach or something, you can use those waves to crash on the shore, or maybe you can even do it up here in the front of the boat. So let's see if we can make that happen. So I'm going to take the waves here, and instead of doing a what do you call it, a tile, I actually put it in the paintbrush and take this waves, the shoreline, and put it up here. And see, this is really big. That's too big. So I want to go with like 3 or 4 maybe. Yeah, see, that's a lot closer. Okay, so I'm just going to draw off of this point here, and it's going to be a brush stroke. And maybe it'll just put it in the front of the boat. we'll make it look like the water's kind of crashing over the edges or breaking on the edge. So that's not exactly what I wanted, so I want to flip this over. So let's turn this over. Yeah, something like that. And then apparently you don't want to go right to the edge. Yeah, it's not perfect, but now you can come through here and change the points. So that's what I'll do. So they're not lapping right up on the deck. Take them back a little bit. There we go. So this way you can kind of make it look more like the boat is kind of traversing through the water. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you get it. So that might just give you that illusion that the water's breaking through here. The boat's breaking through the water, that, or maybe it's waves are smacking up against it because that's the front of the boat. So you can do stuff like that. Let's see if there's any other assets that might lend itself. Like we might want to put a little smoke, like maybe there's a smokestack, but in this case we probably won't, but you could do something like that. What's the smoke animation? I don't want to add too much because that's gonna, you might create problems. So I think I'm good. So let's turn on the line of sight and play mode and turn all this stuff back on. And let's see what we got here. So here's this. So you're not going to see the front of the boat. So it's probably absolutely no point in doing that. But that's what I'm saying. Like you'll learn after a while, like what's worth it. So I probably didn't need to do that. But if I worked on the other piece of this where it shows the top of the deck, I would probably use that crashing waves more, or maybe you can use them on the sides a little bit more, make it look like the waves coming off the edge of the boat. I do like the birds. I always, for some reason, I like those. It's probably scaled good or not, but you can shrink those and make them look like they're further down, or you can expand them out and make it look like they're a lot closer to the camera. So if you're like way above the ship, you kind of make it look like that. I think I like it the way it looks. So there we go. So all we need now is some birds and seagull sounds and some waves, and that'll make your day. That'll bring this to life. So you got this movement on the water, and then you got your line of sight all set up, and there's a goblin here that's on board. Yeah. So there you go. So that's just kind of some tips, some uses, some advice, some don't do this, do that type things. It's really honestly the biggest hassle is obviously the time, and then getting to know the behavior of the tool, like with shortcuts and what does what. And then the other thing is quite often if people get overzealous, they build these huge maps, and it just kills the program. It can't handle these big 4K animated maps that are like 50 megabytes. It's really hard on the especially on your players. Like locally, it might be okay, but for your players, it might suck. So when you're done working on your map, you want to left click and drag it, and that way you have a shortcut. And then always place your map where you want it to go when you're going to be using it during gameplay. And I'm just going to kind of put that there, and then I'm going to lock it again, and then I'll recenter it just in case. And now I want to see what it looks like in 2D mode or 3D mode. So we're going to go to the toggle it. There we go. And Let's bring the acolyte over. So yeah, it looks pretty good. It's pretty decent. Yeah, it's not bad. Bring this individual in here. Here's the goblin. Yeah, looks kind of cool. I mean, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So there you go. And I think they are starting to fix some of the effects now, so they work with the 2D part, because before it was kind of broken. So that's getting better. Here we go. Cool. Let's try the other mode. What's this? The token mode. So this is if you're going to be, like, if I'm the goblin right now, you know, what does that look like? If you hold the shift key, it'll speed the camera up. So if you need that rotation to be faster, you hold the shift key. Otherwise, it's like, otherwise it's crazy. Anyways, you get the idea. Yep. All right. So that's all I got. Happy Easter, everyone. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, or your evening, and we'll see you around next time. Next Friday, I'm going to be working on maps next Friday. So I'm going to be working on the Lost Caverns of Sojkant. I'm going to convert the map over to, or use it for Fantasy Grounds and put that in. Kind of do another tutorial similar to this next Friday. But oh, what happened here? Oh, it did break. So when you switch between 2D mode and 3D mode, if you have these effects on, you see now the water's on the deck here. So that's a problem. So if you have effects on your map, and like this water effect, for some reason it moves it. I don't know why that is. So to battle that, I'd have to turn that off. So probably turn the water thing off, the visibility of it. Yeah, turn it off or delete it. But yeah, that can be problematic. See, now it's not on there, but yeah, that's an issue for sure. All right, guys, take care. Have a good one, and